Thank you very much, Jonathan. And now from the Rainforest Alliance, Meriwether Hardie. Welcome, Meriwether.
I first heard the words Rainforest Alliance when I was riding through Argentina on horseback, and I met a Rainforest Alliance certified farmer. I had just been awarded a journalism fellowship with Bill McKibben, an environmental writer in the US and founder of 350.org, and I was researching the conflict of conservation. In my terms, that was looking at different people from different cultures, from different perspectives, all coming together, both on a local level and a global level, and saying that a certain land area was important and had to be preserved. I was looking at the resulting conflict that happened when these different opinions about how land should be preserved and what the appropriate land use model was. I vividly remember my interview with this farmer where he explained to me that over here on his land was old-growth forest, and this old-growth forest was essential to the watershed of his land, and therefore he was working to preserve it to make sure that his children could inherit his land and continue to farm. And over here, he was working to increase his yields. In other words, working to grow more on the same amount of land versus expand out into the surrounding forest. For me, this was the first time that I'd heard a farmer, specifically a small-scale farmer, ever use words of conservation and business in the same sentence. And right then, I was very intrigued by Rainforest Alliance and determined to research more into their model and what they did. Now, some odd years later, I'm here speaking to you all representing that very organization. And that story is important to me because it speaks to what Rainforest Alliance does and our model. This year, Rainforest Alliance is celebrating our 28-year anniversary. And when you look around the room, and when you think about what you ate for lunch and where you sat, many of the products that you ate, drank, sat on, and are currently writing on come from the forest. Also, forests are essential to the health of our water and to our climate. And therefore, the aim of Rainforest Alliance, essentially, is to ensure that the products that come from these areas are produced in a way that is sustainable, meaning produced in a way that is good for the people who produce them, as well as in a way that's good for the environment, and that will ensure that that environment will be here for many generations to come. Therefore, as you see in our mission statement, we work to conserve biodiversity and ensure sustainable livelihoods, because you need both social and environmental in order to truly achieve something sustainable. Rainforest Alliance works in 3 different sectors. We work in agriculture, forestry, and tourism. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about our agriculture work, and specifically a project that I'm working on where we aim to network the supply chains that we work in and to connect everyone from producer to consumer in a single communication platform. How we achieve our mission is we engage producers and companies and transform their business practices, and then we connect you all, the consumer, to those sustainably produced products by marking those products with a seal. We call it Follow the Frog because we're asking you to follow the seal. It's a green seal with a frog with a ring around the outside. Here's that seal on the upper left-hand corner. And I'm just curious, how many, can you please raise your hand, how many of you have seen that seal before? That's great. And then here's the next trivia question. I'm curious, from the moment that I walked in the building this morning until right where I'm standing right now, I spotted the frog, and it was in a very public place. And I'm curious if anyone else, can anyone else tell me where they saw this frog, potentially this morning? Maybe at breakfast. I'll buy you a cup of coffee afterwards if you get it. It's okay. I was wearing my coat, and I took off my coat, but in my coat I had a tea bag. And this morning at breakfast, Lipton tea was served. And the seal is currently on Lipton tea. An exciting announcement this year, Lipton will be reaching 100% Rainforest Alliance certified. We certify all of the smallholder farmers in Kenya that are sourcing to Lipton. So that's a really exciting, big deal for us. But so spot it on many different products, but if you drink Lipton tea while here, I'm sure you'll see it. So this slide just represents our agriculture work. But the point I want to make, and these numbers now are a couple months old, I apologize, we meant to switch this with a newer slide, but the point I want to make is that we are hitting some tipping points in markets. We work in over 100 countries in 100 different crops. But in coffee, cocoa, tea, and bananas, we're hitting some major numbers, where we certify, with this slide, over 4.6% of the world's coffee, 10.2% of the world's cocoa, 11.2% of the world's tea, and 15% of the bananas export. Rainforest Alliance works in many different ways, but what's unusual about our work, especially as a not-for-profit, is we work throughout the supply chain. So we work all the way on the ground with producers, all the way to consumers. On the ground, we have many different technical assistance programs that we work with farmers and implementing NGO partners, such as finance programs, market assistance, technical assistance around different best management practices. We then work to connect those consumers with companies that are willing to buy the product for that price and for the mark of sustainability that comes along with that product. And then we work in education as well to help educate consumers about looking for the seal. In each of the 3 different sectors we work in, we've either founded or co-founded a standard in order to represent best management practices for that crop and for that sector. In agriculture, it's called the Sustainable Agriculture Network. So when you see that green frog on a product, you know that that product was produced on a farm that did not allow child labor, where workers had the right to organize, where workers were paid a fair wage, where certain environmental practices were achieved, where soil management was a high priority and appropriate water use was also included. So this is just an example of some of the key different things that incorporate in that standard. That standard has more than 100 different criteria in it. It's built on an environmental, economic, and social pillars. But again, this is just an example of some of the things that you can trust when you see that seal on a product. And let me go back for a second. And so next, I'm going to talk with you about this current project that I'm really excited about. It's a project to try to network all of the players in the supply chains that we work in. So take cocoa, for example. We work on the ground with cocoa farmers. We do a lot of work in Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana. We help with technical assistance and verification and certification with those producers. And then we work all the way up the cocoa supply chain with importers and exporters, all the way to you all, consumers, who are going to eat that chocolate bar. 2 years ago, we worked with a community-centered design organization called Context Partners, and I went to Côte d'Ivoire with them, and together we mapped the entire cocoa supply chain from consumer to producer to look at how information is traded up and down that value chain. Our goal was to understand what types of information each player currently had access to, what types of information they wanted access to, and how information was or was not traded up and down that supply chain. The result of that was a couple of really important findings. One of them I'm not surprised at, but still shocked me, is that producers are the most important player in that supply chain, yet they're the most disconnected. This is in crops all around the world. In coffee and chocolate, for example, over 99% of those producers in that, making that crop are small-scale farmers, so they have 1 to 3 hectares. And the majority of those farmers have no idea what happens to their product once it leaves the farm. With chocolate, for example, chocolate takes a couple different processes to actually make it into the chocolate that you know and love. And many cacao farmers have never tasted chocolate and have, again, no idea what happens to their cacao beans once they leave the farm. So when I was in Côte d'Ivoire, one thing I heard again and again from farmers was, we want to be connected in this network. We want more information. We don't have access to market prices. We want a pen pal in the United States or in Europe. We want to know who the families look like that are eating our chocolate bar. We want to know what happens. We want to be involved. We don't feel empowered right now. So that study was very valuable in many ways and launched the project that I'm working on today. Before I get more into that project, I want to show you a video that we put together, and this video was not for consumers. It's an internal video, but we made it for chocolate farmers that we work with. We worked with a great leader in one of the cacao co-ops that we work with, who's very charismatic, and we asked him if he would want to help us story tell to the other producers in Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana to help show them what happens to their chocolate. And the theme of this, for me, is a theme that we have heard a couple times today already, but when you create empathy, you create a community, you create people unified around a common theme. And so one goal of this video was to begin to help cocoa farmers know where their cocoa was going once it left their farm. So ready to play the video, please.
Comment on fait le cabos pour tenir le chocolat?
Je sais pas.
Oui, je ne sais pas comment on fait le chocolat. Je m'appelle Kofi Kwadjo Adrien. Je suis un planteur, je fais du cacao ici. Je connais très bien. Autrement, je fais au moins un sac à 2 sacs. Ce qui est jaune, c'est ça qui est vrai cabos. Ça entend comme ça, puis je fais comme ça. Pourquoi j'aime ça? Parce que c'est ici, la bonne qualité se prépare. Et puis, c'est sec. Quand je vois que les grains sont bons et puis c'est sec, je vois que c'est bon. Je mets dans le sac, dès qu'il arrive, on met dans le camion et puis il transporte pour aller à la coopérative. On s'en va à Daloa pour aller voir mon cacao coopérative Fille du Fouet. Ils vont analyser mon cacao que j'ai envoyé. Première étape, on sonne. Après, on met sur le bascule, on pèse. Et troisième étape, on donne reçu. Merci. On a versé dans le sac de Rainforest, on envoie au port d'Abidjan. On est sur la mer d'Abidjan. Et c'est ma première fois de venir sur la mer. Quand je vois le bateau qui transporte mon cacao en Angleterre, je suis en joie. Donc maintenant, je m'en vais à l'aéroport d'Abidjan pour aller prendre avion, pour aller en Angleterre, pour voir comment on prend mon cacao pour faire un chocolat. Oh, ici, il fait trop froid. Il faut que je gagne mon bateau pour me protéger. Sinon, ça c'est pas bon en Angleterre. Merci. J'ai vu Big Ben, j'ai visité où la reine habite. J'ai découvert les animaux d'Angleterre. J'ai réussi à patiner, je n'ai pas tombé. Maintenant, je suis arrivé à Londres. Il faut que j'aille voir réellement ce que j'ai fait là-bas, qu'on prend me faire chocolat. Il faut que j'aille voir vraiment. C'était ma première fois où on fabrique mon cacao en chocolat. Quand j'ai vu, je suis très content. Maintenant, je viens de voir, je viens de découvrir que vraiment ce que j'ai fait, c'est important. J'ai découvert ça dans la machine, j'ai découvert ça dans la ferme. Ah, très bien. Donc quand je vois comme ça, le cacao que j'ai fait en Côte d'Ivoire, et on prend pour faire chocolat ici comme ça, vraiment, quand je vois comme ça, ça me plaît, ça me plaît, ça me plaît. C'est la dernière étape de mon voyage. Je suis là pour voir un magasin qui vend mon chocolat aux consommateurs. Il faut que je cherche. Voilà. Je suis très ému, très à l'aise. Rainforest Alliance, certifié. J'envoie un chocolat à ma femme, à mes enfants, et à tous les producteurs qui sont là-bas. C'est comme une équipe de football. Donc on doit tous jouer ensemble. Donc s'il n'y a pas ça là-bas, vraiment, ça ne serait pas bon ici. Donc comme moi, je fais bien là-bas, si je fais bien là-bas, eux aussi, ils vont marquer ici. Donc on est ensemble. Les bonnes choses certifiées, vraiment, pour protéger l'environnement. Ça va durer pour nos enfants, nos petits frères, les gens qui sont derrière là, jusqu'à ils vont venir. Donc on doit garder ça pour eux. On dit patin certifié, c'est ça là.
Thank you. So the idea of this project came about in that Rainforest Alliance works with over 11,000 companies around the world, over 2 million producers, and many, many millions of consumers. Yet, right now, we do not create a network or a space where those different stakeholders can come together and problem solve and storytell and understand each other's issues and have access to information such at the farm level that they currently lack access to. So the big picture idea of this project is we want to create that network, and we believe that it will help further our mission of helping to connect consumers to producers and having information and understanding and stories flow back and forth between the two, as well as what we hope to do is really help peer-to-peer learning happen. So for example, at the producer level in Côte d'Ivoire, we work with many, many thousands of cacao producers, and two producers may be having the same issue, whether it's a new disease that they're seeing on their cacao leaves, or a question about certification, and they may be 5 miles apart, 10 miles apart, 20 miles apart, 30 miles apart. No matter the distance, if they're outside of the same co-op, they're probably not working together, and they probably don't know that this other person is trying to problem solve the same issue. So what happens is farmers working in isolation versus working together to problem solve. So here's the long-term goal of the project. The short-term goal of the project is a pilot that I'm leading right now in Guatemala. I just got back from a couple weeks of field testing an initial super simple SMS application for farmers. I've been going back and forth from Guatemala over the past year designing this platform with farmers and doing feedback sessions, design sessions, and really understanding and asking farmers what types of information they currently lack access to, what types of information do they currently value, and in what format. I'm choosing to work first with farmers because A, they're the hardest nut to crack. They're remote users. Many of them are low literacy, low income. So they have a very limited capacity from a user group perspective. But also because they're essential to our work, and from our initial studies on this project, they're the most disconnected from the work as well. So we want to connect them to each other, as well as to connect them to the rest of the supply chain. For example, many farmers that we work with right now don't have access to current market prices, weather information, and continued technical assistance once our implementing partners leave the field. They have no way to ask questions or follow up on field school sessions once that staff person is not in the field. So over the next year, continuing over the next year, we're continuing to design and test this platform with the idea that we hope to add on other supply chain players and scale it up to other crops and countries as time passes. There have been a number of really good lessons learned and things that have been difficult that we've had to problem solve around. The first couple points here all come from the initial studies we did in Côte d'Ivoire, but we had those same findings in Guatemala and other places in Central America, where the value chain is linear instead of networked, and producers, although key players, are currently the least connected group in the supply chain. In Guatemala, the infrastructure already exists. We're using technology that's already in place. 86% of the farmers we interviewed already had very simple frijolitos, that they call them, SMS text phones. And some of them had Android phones, and some of the co-op administrators, the heads of the co-ops that we work with, have access to a computer or a tablet as well. So we're using infrastructure that already exists. Farmers very passionate and excited about this project, at least the farmers that we work with. of wanting to receive more information and wanting to be connected into the supply chain. One of the feedback points I got from farmers is people are always coming out into the field, whether they're journalists or people to study impacts of certification, and we're always providing information, but we're not receiving that same information back, and we're really excited to have access and thinking of that information filtering back down. In the initial context assessments that we did in this project, we had way lower farmer literacy rates than expected. And so we had to modify the platform to be way more visual than I was anticipating. So we have two versions. One is a simple SMS text-based application for the types of information that I've previously mentioned. And another is a more photo and video-based platform that they're built off of each other. But the second one, producers that have a simple Android phone or a tablet or a computer have access to and will be acting as community knowledge holders and be acting as the access point, essentially, for other co-op members to come look at the photos and videos. And this we discovered after many, many different conversations, design sessions with farmers, of their preferred way of learning and motivating and creating that empathy. The video you saw of Adrian is obviously, even though we did it internally and for producers, it's obviously a very complex video. And what we're creating for this platform are much simpler videos where farmers are storytelling, saying who they are, what a question they have, or a problem they're trying to solve on their farm. The next steps include continuing to test how to get this platform out to farmers, how to make information more valuable, and how to really facilitate the peer-to-peer learning of this platform. We also want to add consumers and companies to this platform. For me, this part gets really exciting. I'm also not an IT person, so it's also challenging to think about how do you protect information at the farm level, but then how do you also create layers where these different stakeholders are interacting with each other, and what do the different access points look like? And then, as I mentioned, we want to scale this up to other countries and crops that we work in. This project, to me, is really exciting because it provides us with a couple different opportunities. It will never replace face-to-face training or face-to-face communication that we have with our farmers, but it will allow continued learning. It will allow, for example, we work with a lot of female producers, and a lot of them have to miss the field training sessions because they're taking care of children, or they're getting water in the morning, or they're cooking. And so it will allow for continued learning and questions. It also will allow for farmers to ask each other questions and share photos and learn what other farmers are doing both locally and globally. And we also hope that that will continue to instill pride and empathy in them being part of this Rainforest Alliance certified network. There will be plenty of challenges, but I'm excited about it. Another thing, to me, I've done a lot of research, and I'd be curious afterwards if any of you have any other examples of platforms like this, but to me, this platform is transformative for our work. And although there are a lot of remote platforms happening right now around the world, I see that a lot of those platforms are built bottom down. They're built for a need at the top of the supply chain, an organization that wants data or photos or wants information from the field. They send a field technician out to gather data or to work with farmers, and then they leave and the platform leaves. And the goal of this is we're building this for the farmer, the end user, and then we'll scale up and add in the other pieces. So I hope that I got some of you excited about this today, and I'd be interested later, anytime this conference, to hear your thoughts, opinions, or comments. So thank you very much.